Hi, students. This is Heather. Sorry you haven't seen me in a while. I just wanted to start off by saying I really appreciate the patience of the class. So far, this semester's been unexpectedly difficult for me, just having two friends of mine die unexpectedly from heart attacks. So it's really made it difficult for me to keep up with things as much as I would like to. So I really appreciate everybody. Hopefully I'll get caught up here pretty quickly. I just wanted to do an overview of the first three chapters, just sort of face-to-face with you guys. So instead of it all being sort of text-wise, I just wanted to talk about this a little bit. So this class is about lifespan development. HBSE 1 is covering up until adolescence, and then your HBSE 2 will be covering from adulthood to the end of life. Infancy, pregnancy is really the beginning, and the book might not call attention to pregnancy as much as I have, probably because of working as a perinatal social worker. But the opportunities we have and the resources we have for women that are pregnant are crucial to the development of the baby in utero. So it's very important that social workers understand development at the pregnancy level. So I've tacked that on, sort of, definitely talked about it more than maybe the book has. Infancy, birth to 2, again, that can be disrupted if people deliver early, which in our area we have lots of babies with very low birth weight, and some of that has to do with people not knowing the signs of preterm labor or having psychosocial, biological reasons, stressors that cause them to deliver early. So when kids deliver early, obviously the chances of them having not fully developed brains, lungs, guts, basically, are more likely. Also, blindness, deafness are more likely if babies are born super premature. Then the book talks about childhood, early childhood from 3 to 8, and late childhood 9 to 11, adolescence 12 to 18. So in this class, we've been sort of talking about all of that interchangeably. Some of that is so that you guys can sort of apply it to where it's closer to where you are in age. And I realize from the introductions that folks are from all different sort of age groups, but sometimes it's helpful to be able to relate to things from early adulthood, thinking back on childhood. So the book also talks a lot about social work and strengths perspective, being able to see the strengths in folks. And it's really hard to do this at the same time as you're deciding what's normal development and what's abnormal development. That's all very socially constructed. So really, people that develop differently might have more obstacles in our current culture to succeeding, to finding love, finding a fulfilling life. And that's not so much the person's issue as it is a cultural issue, in my opinion. So it's important, even if a child has some kind of delay or is challenging behaviors, that we're looking at what's the strength for them, but also the strength of the family. If all we're looking at is deficits and symptoms, we don't see the full picture, but framing it as that everyone has strengths, everyone has potential is important from a social work perspective. Social workers tend to be a little bit different in that framing than other professionals, so we're important to the team that we bring those strengths in there. Intersectionality, I think we had some slides or some discussion about that, but that's when parts of our identity we're from lots of different memberships, and each of those memberships can be a benefit to us or could also cause stress for us. So an example might be someone who is a black female, also a lesbian. All of those memberships have conflict within them. So the feelings of discrimination, the feelings of obstacles to wellness and success and all of that are compounded by all those different memberships, particularly if each one of those memberships has a certain level of discrimination attached to it, if that makes sense. Biopsychosocial, you guys have been writing about that. That means that there are biological contributions to how we do in life, there are psychological contributions, and then social contributions, right? So, and the biological and the social sort of combine to create some of the psychological things, right? This psychology hardly develops on its own. It's that sort of nature-nurture stuff that we've talked about too. Generalist practice. Hopefully you guys are understanding that you're in a generalist programs, and all bachelor's level social work programs are accredited to be generalist, which means you're learning skills and learning how to analyze things from a micro, like interpersonal level, a meso organizational level, and a macro community level. So you're learning how agencies influence people, how communities influence people, so that you can help solve or try to work towards fixing social problems. Okay. The helping relationship, hopefully you guys are beginning to understand that there's different sort of there's an arc to helping relationships, engaging with a person or a family or a community. In the beginning, you're building rapport, building a relationship of trust, right? Assessing what's going on from a patient-centered or a person-centered. That would be, what do they think the problem is, right? What does the community think the problem is? What does the agency think the problem is, right? Intervention, that's working together with your client to decide, well, what might work to make things a little better. And evaluating and monitoring whether those interventions are working, and then ending the relationship. So the end of a relationship is also very important to how people do. So you're basically summing up the growth that the person's made while in the helping relationship and what they need to do beyond coming to see you so that they can maintain some of that progress and continue to progress. Okay, the competencies. You guys are going to be bombarded with competencies from now until the time you graduate. And if you go on to a master's degree, you'll get it again. But that's knowing what ethical and professional behavior looks like for you as a social worker, being comfortable engaging with diverse populations, people that are different from yourself, advancing social justice and understanding what social justice means, intervening where there's injustice, working towards ending marginalization, oppression, discrimination, that kinds of things, right? Knowing how to engage with research so it can help you improve your practice, but also to do research and talk about what you're doing as a social worker so that you can help advance the field. Policy, understanding policy, and this week you guys have a little bit of policy piece in your partnership activity. You know, understanding how policies can be helpful. Also, they aren't the end of, they're just sort of a foundation towards solutions. So being really good at analyzing policy and where things need to change. And then the helping relationship again. That's the last sort of string of competencies. Hopefully you guys are getting a bit of an idea of how power works, how privilege works. Your social status gives you an advantage and influence over other people. Certain folks have more status than others, right? And a lot of that has to do with skin color, gender, sexuality, right? When you have power, you can do what you want. and nobody really stops you, right? If you don't have power, then other people are telling you what to do. If you have privilege, it means you have special rights and benefits. If you don't have privilege, it means you don't have those things. And acclaim, being praised constantly for what you do, right? That doesn't happen for everyone. In terms of some of the chapters, just being really familiar with, this class, I think I've said it over and over again, but it's really, you should think of it as a study session on some level for your licensure exam, your LSW exam. HBSC is a real important part of that exam, so there's certain concepts you want to feel pretty familiar with so that you do well on that exam. And also, it's important to be a good social worker and being an ethical social worker to understand and really study these concepts. So knowing that there are 3 trimesters in a pregnancy, understanding what conception is, ovulation, what an embryo is, right? In terms of Freud, really having an understanding of what he means by the conscious, the preconscious, the unconscious, repression. So there's things that are too disturbing for us to process that we push down into our unconscious. And then there are things that bother us, that sort of preconscious stage where it's starting to come up into our thoughts and we're alarmed by it and continue to try to press it into our unconscious. Repression is just that, right? Anything that we're disturbed about in terms of our thoughts, emotions, repressing it, keeping it from our conscious mind. Freud talks about id, ego, and superego. Your id is your desire, right? Your sort of what we would think of as your sort of primal urges, right? So needing to eat, sleep, be aggressive, instincts towards love and affection. All of those things are your id. Your superego are all the rules of society, that you learn that say these are things that are okay, these are things that are bad, right? And your ego's the in-between. The part that negotiates all the sort of societal rules, and your drives, your drives for things, your sort of natural drives. I don't like that word natural, but so the ego's in between negotiating those two things. Freud had developmental stages that, there's a lot of debate about if these things are really accurate or not, but he broke up sort of the part of the chapter that we're dealing with now into an oral stage, which is from birth to 18 months, and that's just that little babies sort of explore their environment through their mouth. 18 months to 3 years is the anal stage. This is a potty training time, an awareness of how your body works. Phallic stage 3 to 5 years old. This is just being aware that you have genitals, and also aware of sort of gender roles, on a societal level. Latency begins at the end of whenever people start to sort of come out of the edible electric complex, which is identifying, with father or mother in terms of being fearful of those roles. Also, just the understanding the sort of sexual psychological dynamics between men and women and children and adults, right? And that stage ends with puberty. And then you move to the genital stage, which is puberty until death, so the rest of the time. And that's really more of being aware of your sexuality and the importance of your some Some of the other developmental theories that we talked about are phenomenology, which Carl Rogers is sort of the big guy for that, or one of the beginning guys, and that personality develops based on people's unique experiences. So my personality is different from someone in the class because of where I've lived, my family, places I've traveled, things I've eaten, that kind of stuff, right? Sort of feminist developmental theory talks about how society really creates or constructs our personalities. So a lot around sort of fear and reward. We're rewarded for certain things societally, we're punished for other things, so it's really does sculpt our personalities. And that a lot of that creates really unhelpful gender limits that aren't necessarily accurate. So certain characteristics of different genders are emphasized, or different that really do end up limiting folks and really do inform people's personalities. Piaget is in these chapters too, and he talks about ways kids learn to think. Sensory motor stage between birth to 2, pre-operational 2 to 7, concrete operational 7 to 12, and then formal operational, which is where you are able to think fully. Sensory motor is really based on reflexes and basic understanding of your environment. The pre-operational is when you're able to use symbols to represent things. So this is really when language becomes important. So instead of having to feel something, you can look at it and give it a name, and know that all things that look like a pen might be a pen, right? Concrete operational is when you start to be able to think about other people's perspectives, so realizing other people have had other experiences, and so they might have a different understanding of things. And this is the beginning of what Piaget would say is logical thinking. And then formal operations is where you're able to sort of question rules, understand that things are more complex than just sort of black and white thinking, but more sort of gray and nuanced thinking. So it's logical thinking, but actually being able to think of multiple perspectives for each thing you're sort of facing. The book talks about Bowlby's attachment theory. Sort of pre-attachment, birth to 2 months. Attachment in the making is 2 to 8 months. True attachment, 8 to 18 months. Reciprocal relationships at 18 months. And these qualities of attachment, how you can do a good job of attaching with kids, or kids attaching to adults. But really that bond between, it doesn't have to be parent, but bond between adult or older person with a baby and a child helps them to not be fearful of their environments, to understand their environment so that they can continue to grow instead of sort of being in survival mode, right? So knowing and trusting that someone's going to be there for them if they can't figure something out. Knowing and trusting that someone's going to be there to provide basic needs, warmth, love, food, those kinds of things, right? So at this time, attachment is really important to later development. So if kids' attachments have been disrupted, it can cause some psychological distress beyond that childhood age, where kids don't trust that people love them, that they can meet their basic needs. So they often will go on to have some anxiety and depression, feeling helpless, that kind of thing. So that's that theory. We've talked a lot about systems theory. You guys have teach a concept about that, but understanding that family systems most families are very resilient. They have some kind of stressor happen, and they're able to get back to a homeostasis, so some kind of stability. There's subsystems within the family. Some of those subsystems might cause problems, others not. So there's like a sibling subsystem, there's a parent subsystem, there's like the men in the family, there's the women in the family. These are all sort of little groups within the family system. Boundaries. Some families have too rigid boundaries, or they don't let any other sort of outside views or outside influences get in. Some have very permeable boundaries where it's hard to tell what your role is, that things are unpredictable, and that can cause some anxiety for the different members of the family. You guys talked about input, output, feedback, entropy, differentiation. I think everyone's got a pretty good understanding of that. So I just wanted to review that a little bit, and then you guys are going to be teaching some stuff this week to each other, and I'll try to do a review of things after the next 3 chapters too. Okay. I'm enjoying the reading. You guys are doing a great job of writing into all these things I'm asking you to explore. So thank you again. Bye.